This episode of The Good Stuff is brought to you by Selux. Here I am with Ben Runkle, owner and founder of Salt and Thyme, a butcher shop located in Austin, Texas. In many ways, Salt and Thyme has all the things you would expect to find at a typical butcher shop. Various cuts of meat, sausages, and whole animal carcasses in the back. The only unusual thing about Salt and Thyme actually has to do with its owner, Ben. As I understand it, you used to be a hardcore vegan.
It's true.
What? How do you go from being a vegan to a butcher? Let's find out.
I'm Ben Runkle, and this is Salt and Thyme Butcher Shop, and we're a full-service butcher shop and restaurant specializing in whole animal butchery. So I was a vegan for almost 8 years, from when I became vegetarian and then quickly vegan in my freshman year in college. I was involved in like the punk rock hardcore scene, or a lot of straight edge and vegan kids in that community, and it was very supportive, and it was easy. Didn't have to worry about going out to eat with friends and having to fight over going to a place that I could eat at, because we were all vegetarian. If you weren't, you were the odd man out. You know, when I was 18, going to school, I was exposed to a lot of information about factory farming and all the horrors of that. And like a lot of people, when you are exposed to that information, I made I think a pretty logical decision to just stop eating meat altogether. I think the main problem with how meat is produced in this country, and now kind of how we're exporting that model around the world, is that it is so driven by price. The margins are very small in the meat processing industry, and the big buyers, companies like Walmart and McDonald's, are super cost sensitive, and so they put so much downward pressure.
The horrors of the meat industry are well documented, and as more people become aware of them, it's not surprising that many become vegetarians or vegans, like Ben. The drive to produce cheap meat has led the large-scale meat industry to resort to some less than ideal practices, like giving animals cheap feed and growth hormones to fatten them up more quickly, overusing antibiotics, and confining livestock to horrible cramped conditions their entire lives. The cost of these practices isn't reflected in the price we pay for steak or ground beef at the supermarket, but we definitely pay for it in other ways. High-grain diets, unsanitary conditions, and the overuse of antibiotics have been blamed for numerous E. coli and staph infection outbreaks, as well as the evolution of antibiotic-resistant superbugs, which sounds like a great premise for a superhero movie, but not a great premise for living as a human on planet Earth. Also, fun fact, mad cow disease was actually spread by feeding cows the meat and bone meal remains of other cows. That is so f***ed up. Many factory farm animals spend their whole lives in overcrowded pens on top of a pile of their own feces, making it easier for bacteria to spread and creating other environmental problems. Excessive animal waste and fertilizers used for feed can contaminate rivers and other bodies of water, and when it comes time to clean it up, it's usually the taxpayer that has to pay for it. Arguably the most shocking thing about the meat industry, though, is the awful ways in which the animals are treated. I don't need, nor do I want to go into the specifics right now. Suffice to say, it's not pretty. If you're really curious, though, a quick YouTube search on factory farms will give you a number of horrible viewing options. But I'm warning you, it's not good.
But as I got a little older, I think I started to realize that my body was actually craving meat from a nutritional standpoint, and I was eating so much fake meat and kind of junk food, really heavily processed stuff, that I didn't feel very healthy with my diet. At that time, I'd moved to Northern California, so I was in the Bay Area and surrounded by all these really great small farms, small ranchers, and I kind of had an aha moment when I was eating a chicken wing that had a stick in it to make it feel like that, a bone. And it was imported from Taiwan, and it was, all soy monoculture, and next door to me are people who are raising and eating the chickens that they raise. And I realized that, while I still disagreed with factory farming, you can treat animals with a great deal of respect and still ultimately eat meat, kill animals for food, if you do it in an ethical and responsible way. I think it gets hard to learn about sustainable agriculture and stay super rigidly vegan, because so much of organic and small-scale agriculture is dependent on nutrient cycling, which means having livestock animals which will eat grass and then poop. And that creates fertilizer, and that allows chickens to.
So not eating meat isn't necessarily better for the environment.
Yeah, I think that not eating factory farmed meat, unquestionably, if you're a vegetarian, instead of eating factory farmed meat, you're doing something healthy for the environment. But I decided at some point I'd rather support with my dollar people who are doing things the right way than simply withhold it from people who are doing it the wrong way.
Hi, my name is Jodi Osmond. You're at Cedar Valley Sustainable Farm. Right now we're in the field where we have a pastured meat bird operation. We also raise pork, which are breeds and specific strains that have been selected throughout for their eating quality. Well, sustainable for us, what it entails is treating the animals well in a humane way, allowing them to express their true nature. With our hogs, which are up on top of the hill, they get out and root in the dirt, they eat grass, they get to express all their pig-like behaviors.
Basically, let a pig be a pig. So don't put it in a stainless steel box. Cattle like to graze and they like to walk, so you want to make sure that they have enough room to move around, that the water in there, if you're putting supplemental feed, are far enough apart that they don't just stay in one place and stand in their own to eat food in the water. If you're gonna have animals involved, you gotta let them live their life as close to how they would do it if we didn't interfere.
Yeah, it seems to make a lot of sense from a humane perspective, but as it turns out, treating animals well actually makes them taste better too.
I guarantee if you were to take home a steak or a roast or even ground meat from an animal that is raised well, the flavor is going to be much more robust. What the animal eats, how much exercise it gets, all those things change the flavor and the texture of the meat. If cattle never get grass, then the meat doesn't taste the same. It tastes like popcorn, which is a delicious flavor in and of its own, but the complexity of flavor is much less pronounced. So when you taste beef that the animal spent the majority of its life, as it should, walking around on grass and eating grass, even if it got some grain later in its life, you'll still have more complexity of flavor and depth of flavor. Things that cause stress to the animal absolutely create a negative product. That's probably where it's most defined and most pronounced, is if the animal is under stress in the last moments of its life. So those two things, what the animal eats and how it's treated, really have a huge impact on flavor.
Okay, so treating animals well seems like the right thing to do from a moral standpoint, and it actually makes them taste better, but is it actually practical when we talk about financial and natural resources? This is a really important thing to consider. The amount of inputs that go into raising livestock, like feed, land, fertilizer, and fossil fuels, has a direct impact on the cost of the meat and the cost of the environment. Because of the epic scale of the meat industry, raising livestock is a huge greenhouse gas contributor. This is partially due to the methane produced from animal burps and farts, my nickname in high school, but also the massive amounts of fuels used to transport the animals as well as grow and harvest their feed. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization estimates that the production of livestock accounts for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's about as much as the transportation sector. That's a lot. Part of this number is due to the huge amount of grain that's produced for feed. In the US, 60% of all corn that's grown is grown exclusively for livestock. On the other hand, sustainable ranches and farms can eliminate a huge chunk of this by letting their animals roam around freely and eat the grass that's naturally growing. They also don't use hormones or loads of antibiotics, so that's another input you can eliminate. In large-scale farming operations, a lot of resources are also committed to removing all that extra animal waste. But on a sustainable farm, this should not be an issue. Cows can poop any old where they wanna.
The waste of my birds are spread out across the field, and I've not invested any labor in that other than moving the pens forward. It stays where the chickens deposit it and where the grass needs it to grow.
So, by eliminating the need for extra feed and chemicals, and by having everything local to minimize transportation, a sustainable farm should have dramatically fewer inputs. But if you're like me, and you've been to a grocery store a few times, I've been around, you'll notice that grass-fed beef or hormone-free meat is almost always more expensive than the mass-produced stuff. The reality is, it takes a lot more human effort to run a sustainable farming operation, and they'll never be able to reach the level of efficiency as a factory farm. Generally speaking, when it comes to raising livestock, greater efficiency usually comes at the expense of our health, or the environment, or the quality of life of the animal.
Ultimately, I think the real challenge for people like us at Salt and Time, and there's plenty of other people out there who are trying to create an alternative meat model, is that we first have to convince people that meat needs to be way more expensive than we're used to it being.
That's a hard sell.
And it is a hard sell, yeah. Basically, we have to convince people to spend more money for less meat. Like literally more dollars for less pounds. And so consumer expectations do need to change if we're going to move away from a factory farming model. But we have plenty of people who are coming here willing to pay a much higher price. And the good thing, the thing that plays to our advantage is that it also tastes better. I mean, we have plenty of people who probably aren't as concerned about the ethical issues, the environmental issues, just want the best possible steak that they can get.
It does taste better? Can you prove that?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, yes, I believe you can. Certainly based on our anecdotal evidence of the customers and my Do quite a bit of research on what our meat tastes like here, and I find that it's delicious. Yeah, it absolutely is better.
I mean, I'm just wondering if I should sample.
I think you should.
What is this? This is the...
that is actually pancetta.
Oh yeah. Wow. Meat is good. I like meat. I don't know if you like meat, but I do.
The robustness of the beef flavor is really special on this one.
Bresaola? It's good. It's good. Oh man, but flavor is still going.
Yeah.
Flavor is still going. Oh wow. You really want to try this?
I do. Can we cut?
Yeah. What should people look for if they're shopping for meat?
Yeah.
How would they shop?
It's tough. We tell people a lot. People come in here and ask, do you have organic? Do you have whatever? And they're looking for a label or a stamp of approval. And the real challenge is that most of those labels and certifications are designed at this point to be for large-scale producers. They cost a lot of money to get approval on, and so what we look for is transparency. We look for as close to direct link to our ranchers as possible. Ideally, we like to be able to, and this is true in almost all cases, personally visit the ranches and see how they're done. And then we build a relationship of trust with our customers, because I know most consumers don't have the time to do that. I mean, as much as everybody would love to say they do, it's not a Portlandia sketch, right? We can't all just like stop our lives to go to the farm to see how the chicken we ate was raised. And I wish that was an easier answer, because obviously that doesn't really translate, other than to say to find a source, a supplier that you believe that you can trust, ask them the questions, the things that you personally care about. Farmers markets are a great place to go if you don't have a butcher shop in your town that you can talk to. You saw we have a big glass window. You can literally watch when we're receiving meat where it comes from, and you can watch us cleaning it. We're not hiding anything back there. And so transparency is the ultimate thing for me. If you can't have a relationship with the person that you're buying your meat from, then you're probably only going to get so far.
The mantra is less meat, better meat. And better encompasses better for the animals, better for the environment, better for the workers. Every step of the process we know and we're comfortable with.
You know, I always have said if I had a mission in starting this business and being a butcher and everything else, it would never be to convince people who have decided not to eat meat again. It would be to convince people who are already eating meat to eat better meat. And what I would say to people who are vegans, vegetarians, and who really want to see the end of meat production is, I want to see the end of feedlots. The abuses that are so horrifying to you are just as horrifying to me are happening at feedlots. So why don't we try to shut down feedlots first?
Yeah.
And then we can have the debate about whether or not we should shut down small farmers who are raising hogs and selling to places like Salt and Thyme. And I'll have that debate.
There's a gray area there that we could focus on. I think we should think that way about a lot of issues, not just food.
Yeah, sure.
So, a lot of people are accustomed to the current meat model because that's just the way it is. You know, we've been doing it this way for a while. Might as well keep doing it. I am always optimistic about the future, and I think we can change this. We can make this better. We can have our meat and eat it too, or as the saying goes. So what do you guys think? Does it matter how animals are treated if we're just going to eat them anyway? Should we abstain from meat entirely? Or is there a nice middle ground that we can work with? Let us know in the comments. This episode has been made possible in part by Selux. Selux is a company that focuses both globally and locally to provide innovative and environmentally conscious lighting solutions for all types of lighting projects and design needs. A link to their website in the doobly-doo. And now here's the lovely bearded Matt with a response to some of your comments from our last video. Take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And special thanks to our Patreon supporters for making this episode possible, and super special thanks to our Kickstarter supporters for making this entire season possible. So last time we talked about a wastewater treatment plant that is turning our waste into fertilizer and energy. Some of you had some questions about that, and I did too. As we learned, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District generates electricity by burning methane produced by microbes that eat our waste. Methane is a greenhouse gas. It's actually much worse for global warming than CO2. So how can burning methane be an environmentally friendly option? Well, first of all, burning methane is better than just letting it leak into the atmosphere, because burning it turns it into CO2. which by comparison is much less harmful greenhouse gas. And burning methane releases less CO2 than by burning coal, so it's a cleaner option overall. Obviously not a perfect solution, but since Milwaukee is burning their own microorganisms, the carbon cycle is kept in balance, more or less. Now, I couldn't find any numbers on this, but I would imagine since that CO2 is coming from us and our waste, and not a million years of accumulated coal, it would eventually be removed from the atmosphere by plants. If I'm wrong about that, let me know why in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you next time.